saw. Still a lot of questions about this as well. Joining me live now via Zoom is Kim Wald. She is a personal injury trial attorney and a partner at the Haggard Law Firm. And we also know an attorney who represented the family of Tyre Sampson in their civil suit following that 14-year-old's death from the Orlando FreeFall ride at Icon Park back in 2022. And Kim, we appreciate you joining us this morning here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thank you for having us.
Kim, some of these details are beginning to come out, but still a lot we don't know. Just give me your first reaction when you heard about what happened and some of what we were learning so far.
So when I first heard what happened, my first thought was, not again. You know, this is absolutely the worst thing that you can ever hear about, especially at an amusement park where you're supposed to be able to go and just have fun. You know, representing the family of Tyre Sampson, we learned that there's a lot of things that need to be done behind the scenes to make sure that these rides are safe and that people don't get injured on these rides. And as we start learning more information, we need to figure out exactly what happened on this ride and make sure that it couldn't have been prevented.
So is that some part of what's happening now? Kind of take us behind the scenes. I know you would be familiar with what happens after something like this. What is going on right now when it comes to an investigation into this?
So there's going to be an investigation on a multi-point front here. First, Universal itself will be conducting their own investigation. We also know that the Department of Agriculture was on scene and is going to be involved. The extent of their involvement, again, is not really known at this time because Universal, because of the size of their park and the nature of their employees, they're usually exempt from the Department of Agriculture and the inspections that the state typically does. Universal conducts their own inspections of these rides and then reports to the Department of Agriculture when there are problems. We know that the local law enforcement will also be part of this, and the investigations are really going to be on all three of those fronts, both from Universal, the Department of Agriculture, and local law enforcement.
What is the responsibility of Universal or any theme park and ride operators when it comes to this, and what sort of standards there are?
So there are many standards that exist, the ASTM standards, which are engineering standards and guidelines. They have an obligation, a duty to inspect these rides. We know that this is a German manufacturer of this ride, and they have to make sure that this ride operates safely, that there are no hazards, that there are no ways that a person can die from blunt force trauma when they are riding this type of a coaster. And so these are all questions that we're going to find the answers to when we get more information, when the medical examiner releases perhaps more information specifically detailing how these injuries occurred, where they occurred, the nature of the injuries themselves, where the blunt force trauma was. We also know in this particular case, the harness itself was only a lap harness. Should there have perhaps been a harness over your chest area to protect that? Again, we have to know more about the extent of the injuries, and then we're going to be able to fill in the gaps of what could have or should have been done to prevent a tragedy like this from occurring.
We also know there are often warnings when you're walking up to any ride at theme parks and places where it will kind of tell you maybe if you have certain issues not to get on this ride. I'm wondering what that does to protect entities from potential legal action in cases like this.
So in the case that we had previously, the Tyre Sampson case, the manufacturer actually had specific limitations about weight of individuals on a ride. And in that case, there weren't any warnings. And Tyre never should have actually been on that ride in the first place because he was too heavy. The harness didn't fit. And if there was a safety belt that installed, which there wasn't, that never would have clipped. So knowing what the manufacturer's recommendations are, what recommendations from similar rides and similar manufacturers are for this particular ride is going to be absolutely critical. What warnings should have been in place? If the warnings were in place, were they sufficient? Were they properly communicated? We know that this ride has only been open for a few months, and so all of these questions are still unknown at this time.
Kim, you talk about Tyre, and that was obviously a tragedy, first of all, but a case that has gotten a lot of attention. I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the lessons that we can take away from that, and that kind of civil suit coming to an end, and how this applies and what we can learn from that as we move forward.
One of the most important lessons from Tyre's case was the transparency and learning the information as we received it. When we learned that there was a manipulation done to the seat that Tyre was on, that was absolutely critical information, because in that case, there were these free falls operating all throughout the United States and abroad. So knowing what actually was the failure in that case was critical for public safety. So for this particular case, my hope is once they know what happens, that information is immediately released to the public. Because if that can help any other ride that is currently operating and any person that's going on the rides, we need to know about that information now. That can't just stay hidden while the investigation continues.
Do you expect this ride, the Stardust Racers, to remain closed for a while? What's the process look like from here?
So the process, I anticipate it will be closed, whether it's a matter of weeks, whether it's a matter of months. That really depends on what they find out. They're going to be doing a number of testing. They'll probably be bringing in some independent engineers to do testing of the ride. They're going to be scavenging if there are any video surveillance showing exactly where the failure occurred, when this individual stopped breathing, when the individual had those blunt force traumas occur. All of that is going to be critical to when or if this ride can reopen.
Kim, what should people know and what should they keep in mind anytime they go to ride a ride, no matter where it is?
Be cognizant, be aware, make sure you are reading those signs. If you're too tall for the ride, don't try to do it. If you're too heavy for the ride, if you have fears, if you have any of those pre-existing conditions, we know these rides are supposed to be for fun and for amusement, but they can turn dangerous and in some situations can turn deadly. So it is not worth the risk. If you fit into one of those categories, please take that seriously. We don't want to see any of these other injuries or horribly deaths occur again.
Kim Wald,